What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Imperfect Swing Golf Podcast. Today we have a special guest joining us from the PGA show. He's also one of the key members of Team Bridgestone. I'll leave it up to Adam just to give us a short little intro into who he is and what he does at Bridgestone Golf.
Yeah, absolutely, Shannon. Thanks for having me on. I'm right here in Orlando. We're kind of kicking off the next few days here at the show. We have some exciting things to announce. I'm the golf ball fitting manager at Bridgestone Golf. Even outside of that, I'm lucky enough to do a lot of our digital content too. So I oversee a lot of our digital marketing, and that's kind of almost just as much as ball fitting. So there's a couple hats that I wear, but yeah, as far as the history into golf, I grew up in a really small country town in the panhandle of Florida, and we didn't really have golf and just played a little baseball and stuff like that. So I went off to college. I was going to be a civil engineer. That's what I wanted to do. And a good friend of mine got me into golf, Pete Sands, who's right here in close to Orlando now. And he offered me a position at his course while I was in college, and it completely, totally distracted me from studying or anything. So like the golf course, I would drive right past the engineering school and go to work early and play some golf. So it was a huge distraction, but it ended up being like the best thing that could have ever happened to me. So I kind of finished up engineering and ended up going to the green grass side of things. I wanted to be a golf pro or a GM or something like that. So I passed my PAT, was kind of going through the normal PGA system thing, and met some good friends up in Atlanta. We moved up there, me and the wife, and met some good people at Bridgestone. And they gave me a really cool opportunity to do ball fitting. So ball fitting was my first step into Bridgestone Golf, and that was when you go around and you do the live fittings and test against the competitor. And so I did that for about 6 or 7 months, and then I was very lucky enough somebody left R&D, Bridgestone R&D, so it opened, so it was like a perfect little meld of engineering and golf. So I loved my time at R&D. I'm not there now. I moved over to marketing, but spent about 4.5 years in the R&D department, and it was super fun to work with the players. Obviously, that's the fun part, right? Working with Tiger and Fred and Bryson and Nick Price, Brant Snedeker, all these great players. Hudson Swafford, who's not with us, that just won. Really great guy, great ball striker. But Davis Love. So that was the most fun part. And when marketing came and approached me, I said, hey, I don't really want to give up the testing of these players and being involved making the ball. I'll move over to marketing and do this stuff, and I love that and love the creativity that marketing gives me. But I still want to work with the pros. I still want to work with the R&D team. So the manager of the R&D facility is still a really good friend of mine, Andrew Troutner, and we work very well together. And I go and still attend the testings and helping them run TrackMan and but also the communication with the player is nice because now I oversee golf ball fitting, so I can ask them the marketing questions of what they like about the ball and kind of why it fits them, even outside of the numbers game that the R&D team does. So now I'm the golf ball fitting manager and oversee a lot of things. I enjoy doing a lot of content, around social and the website and YouTube and things of that too. So it's really fun. Bridgestone allows me to do a lot of unique things and wear a lot of hats, which I like. It kind of gets your hands in a lot of different activities and you can control some things at Bridgestone. So I love it here.
I think a question, for someone who's been part of the team for about 3 years now, I guess is, for you seeing that astronomical incline with Bridgestone, having the big names like obviously Tiger, who's the GOAT, and not many people can reach the audience that he can, but you also added Lexi and Bryson, who are kind of catered to the younger generation, the longer hitting generation as well. And then obviously you have Fred Couples, who's one of the sweet swinging classic guys out there. How's it been for you to kind of witness this up close, and just your thoughts on how Bridgestone's been growing over the years?
Yeah, it's been a wild. This January actually marks 10 years I've been with Bridgestone to the date almost, and it's been a pretty wild ride from when we started. We had, like, when I first got to Bridgestone, it was like the Cooch and Brant Snedeker show. Those guys were like in the top 10 in the world. They were super consistent. Brant won the tour championship. Matt was winning players and winning yearly, and those guys were so consistent. And so when we came in, we were kind of, I was kind of spoiled with this very consistent, golf. And then so a couple of years later goes by, and those guys are still playing well. But a couple of years later, we signed Bryson coming out of college, and one of his biggest things was consistency of the ball. And I remember our manufacturing director was taking him through the factory, and no player we've has ever been treated in the way he was when we recruit him. Usually they come and they test the ball on their own, but he actually begged for a factory tour because he wanted to see how the sausage is made. I want to see behind the scenes what you guys are doing, how you're actually quality controlling these balls down the line. He's very curious in that. So he was asking all these questions about the ball, and I'll never forget our director of the factory walked in he walked in our conference room, and we were all still sitting around waiting anxiously, and then he went to R&D after the factory, and so he wasn't in there, and he goes, "Oh yeah, he's gonna sign with us." After the stuff he just asked me, there's no way that he doesn't, because obviously he'd went to a couple different factories already, up on the West Coast and up there in the Mass area, and they couldn't answer some of those questions offhand or answer them to his satisfaction. And he'd already done some of the work. He'd done the testing on his own in his room when he was doing consistent, when he was balancing the balls and the Epsom salt and stuff like that. So he already knew it was between two companies that tested consistent in his basis. So things like that, we got Bryson coming in kind of, and then of course Nike announces that they're no longer going to do golf. And I'll never forget that day sitting. We were in the conference room. We were all at this meeting. We had our RSDs in, the regional sales directors, and everyone's phone started blowing up around the table, bzz, 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 just buzzing, and it just came out. They made that big announcement, and one of our the director of marketing left the room with a phone call. Everybody was kind of taking calls because now customers are looking for more balls and spaces and stuff like that. But he left the room and he walked out and he come and he sat down next to us and he bumped us and said, "Hey, that was somebody wanting some of the balls." Because then we're like, "Oh, well, all these Nike players are opening it up to play the ball." And he said, "We got to send it down to Jupiter. It's Tiger." And then we were just like, "Oh man." So the relationship was there before with Tiger. I don't think it's a secret that we were involved with manufacturing that golf ball. So he had a good relationship with our team. He knew us very well. He knew the product very well. And so the transition was good. He's told us that he tried out some different balls and wanted to continue that relationship with something he was consistent with. And so in some videos, he's made that comment. So obviously, I hate to deviate from the questions, but you talk about the growth of Bridgestone, and Tiger coming in it just puts that extra stamp of validity, on what you've done already in the first 6 or 7 years you've been there. And everything he's done since then has been pretty amazing. I mean, no one kind of knew what was going to happen after 17, and he come back and he played really excellent in 18. I mean, he played such a great year. He almost won Valspar. He lost to one to Paul Casey. He played amazing at Arnold Palmer that year. Internally, we were like, "Oh my goodness, he's there," and he's playing so great. And then he won the tour championship, and it was bananas. And then of course, the Masters in 19 was it just gives you goosebumps now thinking about it. And we all sat and watched what he did, during that time, and playing that course like he did and winning a major was just amazing. And Tiger, and then Fred has been such a good advocate for our brand. He's great. He plays the ball amazingly. Lexi is another one of those that came to us, and that's what's also an incredible thing about some of the players we get is Tiger calls us through his agent to get the ball. Lexi played the ball for about a year and a half before we signed her. She wanted to play it on her own and figure it out, and and then Bryson kind of the same way. Of course we tried to recruit Bryson, but it was much more of his decision coming to us than us going out there and saying, hey, here's a number we're going to be at, we want you. He ultimately made the decision on his own without, I mean, his agent pretty much said, like, he's going to play what he wants. That's the main goal, especially coming out of college. The money and the salary and all the contracts will come later with success, but right now he wants to choose something he feels good about. And Bryson played on the European tour as an AM the first time he ever put that ball in play, and he shot 64 the first round he'd ever played with the Bridgestone ball. So to this day, he tells us when we ask, like, hey, tell us about your first experience, he brings that up. Well, the first time I ever teed it up in competition, 8 under 64, I'm done. I know it's for me. So again, deviating, but coming back to your question, it's been an amazing 10 years. Obviously, the last 2 years have been a challenge in golf, but also an opportunity. We know what has happened over the last 2.5 years, and the challenge that the whole world has kind of went through. But golf has done a really good job of setting a good example of safety, and obviously it's out in the open. You can get away from people, and I think a lot of people remembered what it was like to play golf outside on your own or with your buddies, and you're outside in nature, and it was a really eye-opening experience. I had several friends, I'm sure you did too, that started playing again, 18, 20 months ago, and then now when you see them, that's all they want to talk about is when you're going to get out and play again. So everyone's getting the bug again. I certainly did too. I probably played more golf in 2020 and early 21 than I had in a long time. So the challenges have been there, but Bridgestone, I feel like we've done a good job to navigate the manufacturing and the processes it needs to do to make a little more golf balls and kind of supply some of that demand that's been pent up from sitting in the house.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, after you guys brought Tiger on, and obviously him winning multiple times after that comeback, definitely kind of shook the world in a different way, because obviously the golf ball industry is very I don't want to say fickle, but it's almost like the reputation has its power in that market. And when you see
Certainly.
your yeah, and when you see your hero Tiger Woods win the Masters with a Bridgestone ball, it kind of changes the way you think. And you're like, oh, maybe I should give that a try. And then all of a sudden, here in South Africa, we don't have any stock of Bridgestone balls anymore, the XS, because everyone's buying Tiger's ball. Um, and personally, I play the XS. That's what I've been playing for, I think, since 2018. And what I first noticed was, and it comes back to kind of what Bryson loves about the ball, is the consistency, right? And um, I think, if I'm not mistaken, for me, it's um, almost every tour player that I've played with, and I like, okay, yeah, just hit the ball. Just I give them one ball just to hit, and it's like they're like, wow, this is unreal. It feels completely different. They're like, oh no, it feels so soft, but at the same time, they're like, it's still going the same distance, even further at times, especially maybe with driver and the longer irons. So I don't know, is that, I guess a personal question that I've always wanted to ask is, how involved is Tiger Woods in the R&D? Um, is there like a big part that he plays, in a sense, maybe on the feedback side?
Very. The answer to that is a lot. I mean, you know, obviously we have a smaller staff. We're very, we're not 12, 15 players deep in our staff. And, that's a choice thing too for us. We like the small and compact, staff to where we can have it a little more controllable. I mean, sure, we'd love to have a 10-person staff, but we love it the way it is. But it also allows us to really focus on a couple of guys and really get their feedback. So, like, for the XS model, the ball that Tiger plays, his feedback is brutally heavily weighted in the way that ball is built. That's why we can launch the ball that he plays. It's not a prototype. He doesn't play a special makeup. It is the XS ball. He has shown up. We've got video. He's talked about this too. he's shown up to an event earlier than when we shipped the balls. I think he showed up, and it was a major. I think it was the 18 PGA. He showed up on Monday or even Sunday the week before, and our stock hadn't showed up to the event. And the tour guys weren't there, and he walked in the shop and grabbed an XS off the shelf and played a practice round with it. And that's what, we like the fact that his ball is the ball of the XS. Now, certainly we test it with amateurs and consumers, and we make sure it's playable. It's not anything that's too spinny to where he can't control. I mean, his spin with the XS is actually pretty low with driver, and then we all know he spins it insanely with his wedges. So he has like the opposite of a lot of consumer problems. He has low spin off driver, and then he has a ton of spin with his wedge. And a lot of consumers have the opposite of that, and they overspin driver and they want more spin around the greens. So for him, the XS is such a great ball, and it actually allows consumers to get some spin. A guy that does swing over 105 that needs a lot of spin, that ball is soft, but it's not spinny by firmness. There's a couple balls in the market that the X versions of them that are really spinny. Like for instance, the Pro V1X is a really spinny golf ball, but it's built based on a lot of firmer compression in the core, a firm mantle layer, and then a really soft cover. So you get the spin because it's like pinching against that firm backboard. The way we kind of build Tiger's ball is the core is actually, it's probably the softest core golf ball that's played on tour by a tour level player. I think it came in measured at 74, 75 compression. That's pretty low. Maybe 76. I can't remember totally. So, but the cover's really soft. The mantle layer is just firm enough that you can pinch up against it. But one thing Tiger will always say to us is, I can't play a clicky ball. Like, I don't care if it performs and it spins around the green. If he hears that click and it just registers in his mind that it's a firm clicky, it's out. I mean, he'll hit shots around the greens with our protos, and we'll have 5 or 6 of them, and he'll hit one, and that feels a little bit softer than mine. It launches good and low. He'll hit one ball, and we'll kind of know, like, I don't think he's gonna like this one, but we got it in there. Let's test it and see. He'll hit it and say, oh. He'll make a little, like, instantly he'll make a little grimace, and he goes, let me hit a few more, and he'll hit a few more and say, yeah, that one's let me see what it does with like a full wedge shot, but I don't like the way that one just did on this 40-yard chip shot. And so he's looking at things like that, and he's making sure the ball gives him what he needs. And I tell you, the XS is so perfect for the guy who does. I play the XS too. I love it. I love the spin around the greens. I just, seeing a ball yoke back from 90, 85 yards is something about it. Still makes me love that shot. So it's really built for that guy who wants to check the ball up a little more. Maybe they can't produce enough spin, so it helps them off the tee and it helps them around the green. So that's a ball that's built for him. So he has a massive amount of feedback, in that ball. But like I said, we make sure it still fits the consumers. But if you think of the other side of that spectrum, you have the X and the XS that are for Tiger and Bryson. You have a model that we build, the RX and the RXS, that is much more consumer driven. So a consumer can't say like, oh, you built this ball for Tiger and Bryson. Like, I can't play that. We've recognized that is true. That ball may be too spinny for most people. So we built a version of Tiger's ball, which is the RXS, that is really designed to be a greenside monster that has a lot of spin, but the inside of that ball is built in such a way to where it won't overspin off the tee. If you're somebody who's, doesn't generate over 105, and let's say you're 82, but then you keep seeing that ball kind of fly up, and oh man, I'm just losing a bunch of distance here. The RXS and the RX are kind of built to be that. They're built to be Tiger's ball and Bryson's ball with a better core construction for consumers that don't produce that speed. So we have long obviously been a over 105 and under 105 company as far as the swing speed is. And, of course, there's a lot of people that give us, kind of pushback on that. But I always equated this, right? If you're thinking about clubs and you're using clubs, there's all different types of shaft flexes because they match up better for swing speeds. Now, of course, there's going to be anomalies to where a guy who doesn't swing very fast may want a stiff shaft because he likes the feel and he likes the kick, and that may work for him. So, yeah, of course, Tiger and Bryson's feedback on the X and XS are used heavily, but we also make these balls, the RX and the RX, that is much more for the consumer and has them in mind. Think of Bryson's ball and Tiger's ball with the cover and mantle, but then a core design that works better for somebody who doesn't swing as fast as Bryson. Of course, Bryson's swinging these days like 135 in competition. So we got to make a ball that, I mean, that's 135. That's in the basically like 0.1%. So like there's guys that swing fast, and we know the X works for guys that swing really quick, but I mean there's people that want that performance but swing 82 or 77. So the RX is kind of Bryson's long drive distance monster, but with a core design that kind of matches up better for the swing speed. So the feedback of the pros, kind of going back to your question, I think the feedback of the pros is so important for the X and XS. But then when it comes to the RX and RXS, we rely heavily on, Lexi, which will be playing the RX moving forward. She's moving down to that ball. It works well for her game, and she really likes it. Fred plays the RXS, so we pull data from his testing and look at it, and he, obviously Fred's been a good proponent for the B330 all those years, that the hard, firmer ball, but now he's using RXS because he likes the control and he likes the way it comes off his club. And he's, it's funny, he talks so much historically about the B330 and how that ball was so firm, and he loved that. Now, he'll tell you, I'm 62, and man, I love the RXS because it really feels like I can compress that ball even more. It kind of gives me that nostalgic vibe of smushing the ball like he used to do. So he plays the RXS. It works out well for him. So we rely on players like that and a lot of consumer testing for RX and RXS to make sure that ball kind of aligns with the needs of the everyday guys that's using it.
And I think, before we get into the new ball that you guys are going to be putting out shortly, you guys obviously just launched your autonomous ball fitting, machine, Otto. And maybe if you can talk a little bit about that, and kind of, you guys are known as the number one ball fitter in golf for a reason. And how is this going to fit into that, well-oiled machine that you guys are now producing on a mass scale?
What a great way to end that question. Well-oiled machine in the ball thing. I love that. So yeah, we launched Auto, and Auto is really called Auto because it's an autonomous golf ball fitting cart. And we kept calling, I mean, like for months we didn't really think of the marketing name. We just kept calling it autonomous fitting cart, autonomous robot, autonomous machine. And so that Auto, just we started using it for short, Auto, for autonomous. So Auto stands for autonomous. Basically, this thing, where you roll it out, you turn it on, and it kind of does the heavy lifting. We wanted to build something for players that feels a little more inviting and less stressful. Like obviously when you go through a live ball fitting, you're going to be with our guy Sam Fu or somebody else, and they're there with an iPad, they're standing over your shoulder, they're helping you. So a lot of people may find that a little intimidating. That's why a lot of people don't take lessons, is because they're afraid that the pro's gonna stand over them and tell them they do something wrong. So ball fitting can be somewhat of an intimidating situation. You got the net, you got all the machines around. So Auto's really designed, it's still a machine, but you roll it out there. Your pro says, hey guys, enjoy your day out here on the range, go see Auto and get fit. And now you walk up to, supermarket or something, and there's self-checkouts. It kind of gets you away from the register. Maybe I'm just in a hurry, I can do it myself. I got a few things. So you go through, and people are becoming more and more, normalized with doing things like that, just completing tasks on their own and kind of getting in and getting out. So Auto was designed also with the new people in mind. Obviously, it's got a launch monitor in it, so your avid golfers are going to love this thing. We feel like once we get it out there in a broader sense, and really get it out of this small test market and get it broad, you're gonna have people propped up on this thing, hitting shots after shots. Oh, let me go through another fitting. I want to see, what my driver's doing here, which is great. We want people to have more access. It's like the old saying, right? Knowledge is power. We at Bridgestone, as the number one ball fitter in golf, we think that if consumers understand their parameters more and more, that helps our story, because we've been blasting that from the mountain forever, saying we want you to understand what spin does to your ball. We want you to understand what launch conditions do, or launch angle. We want you to understand your swing speed and how that affects what model you should play, and so on and so forth. So the more knowledge that we can give the consumer, the better it'll be. So avids will flock to this thing when they see it on a range, but really there was over 25 million new golfers in the industry. Not new, but there's over 25 million golfers that participate in golf at a like entertainment level. We're talking about Top Golf and Pop Stroke, the putting courses and stuff like that. So recent surveys have shown there's a lot of people that are interested in golf, but they may not are interested in driving between the gates and going to a semi-private club and really the intimidation of teeing it up for 18 holes. So we built Auto 2 with that in mind, to try to really drive people to that entertainment and enjoyment part of golf, because that's what they're enjoying. They're going to Top Golf and they're having a few drinks and they're hitting a few shots, and I hit a couple bad ones, but it doesn't really matter here. It's like bowling, right? You get a gutter ball and you get to throw again. That's what I've always long thought, that Top Golf was a very good equivalent to bowling, because obviously there's professional bowlers that bowl really good and they're very serious and they got their gloves and stuff like that. But then you got your league guys who come in and want to drink a couple beers and throw it down there, and they shoot what they shoot. And then you've got even lower people who go bowl and just they do whatever and they don't care what they shoot. And that's golf is very similar in that way. Top Golf has really done a good job of kind of feeding that. So long story short, we've designed Auto to be a ball fitting machine and beyond. We want it to be even more. Like, obviously in its core and its foundation, it is a ball fitting mechanism. We want people to understand their conditions, but we want to do it in a way that can be fun. So we've got a lot of different software updates that we're working on now. It's obviously built right now to be, you walk up, you put in your data, you put in a little bit about yourself, about your game, and then you're going to get a ball fitting recommendation based on a few swings. In the future, we've got a lot of things that we're building into this thing. An in-depth fitting where you're going to hit driver, 8-iron, wedge, and then you understand your driver off the tee, you understand your approach conditions, and then you understand what your ball does around the greens. So a little bit more in depth, all the way from tee to green. We've got a long drive update that's going to go into it. So let's say a pro has 120 people playing in a charity tournament. You could roll it up to a tee. You could set it up. You click a few buttons. It's got a scrolling leaderboard, and everybody hits their drive down the fairway, and it tells you your distance. And you can have a leaderboard at the end of the day, and your signature next to it on, Shannon had the longest drive of the day. He's up at the top. So that's kind of some of the fun things that we're building into it. Competitor ball fittings. We're looking at targeting, to where you practice on, 150-yard shots and scoring and stuff like that. So that's a lot of the things we're looking in Auto is to kind of make it easier, make it enjoyable, and then use that 15 years of ball fitting experience and 3 million fittings that we've already done, and continue to drive fittings to players and drive home that the ball is the most important piece of equipment that you could choose. It's the only thing you're going to use on every shot. I mean, it's if you shoot 80, you've used the ball for 80 times. It's going to be the thing that's most consistent in your game. So make sure that it fits your.
Yeah, and make sure that it's a Bridgestone. And I think, looking at the offering that you guys have across the board, what I like about it is it's inclusive. You're not looking at or favoring one specific golfer. It's very easy for these brands to kind of piggyback off of their pro golfers and cater to, like, this is tour level performance. But when you're looking at the Tour B line, you guys literally cover every single golfer under the sun. You have your tour level seeking players who are swinging it over 105. But then you also have the guys that are under 105, and you kind of cater to that too, which is your average handicapper, average golfer, male or female. And I think that's a good point to make as well, that it's kind of catered towards, unisex and covering all those bases. And I think with that being said, the Tourby line has been so consistent across the board, from offering that tour level performance. And I guess the question now is, how did you guys improve on it with the latest line of Tourby? And how is this going to benefit golfers going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's why we're here this week. We're kind of launching a new golf ball. We launched Auto, which I kind of talked about a second ago. You mentioned you also mentioned that we work with consumers and we make sure it fits their game. I mean, just hitting on that before I get to the new stuff. Our most popular balls in our lines aren't the one that Bryson and Tiger play. They are. They're very close typically, but like a ball that fits the consumer better is what we sell more of. And internally, of course, marketing, and you want to really rely on the Tiger and Bryson and all that, but you really need them to validate what you're doing through the line. We don't necessarily want Tiger to sell more excess than anything else, because that's his ball. And there is a certain percentage of people that fit it for sure, and they should play that ball. But we want Bryson and Tiger to validate the things we're doing as a brand. So the RX and the E12 Contact, they're great sellers, and they're higher than the other balls because they fit consumers better. So other brands may sell their top line ball because they say, hey, the pros use it and so should you. We never want to adapt that process. We don't ever want to say, oh, Tiger uses the XS, so you should too. We'd rather say Tiger chose Bridgestone because it fit him, and that XS fits you. You should choose Bridgestone, and you should play what fits you. So that's kind of the segue there. And I love that you brought up that we make consumer balls, because we feel like we're a consumer golf ball company rather than a tour driven golf ball company. We have tour players that play it and they validate it on the highest level, but then we make golf balls for everybody. We just happen to make tour balls for tour players too. So that's a really cool thing, and that's one of the earliest things I got told when I came into the brand, by my boss, Dan Murphy, who's now the president and CEO. He was in the marketing. He was VP of marketing at the time, and he said that. He goes, we just happen to make balls for tour players, but we design balls for all skill levels and all types of demographics of players. So on to the juicy stuff, on to the reason. The 2022 Tour B, which is launched and announced. We're so excited about that. It's a continuation of what we call internally contact science. In 2020, we launched the Tour B line that had the reactive cover. We were one of the first companies to put impact modifiers into the cover. Still one of the only ones that I know. So obviously all the covers are made out of urethane, and people just choose different urethane firmnesses. Oh, I want a Shorty 41 or a Shorty 50, and I'm going to put that on the cover, and that fluctuates spin. Put a firmer cover on, less spin, softer cover, more spin. So we put impact modifiers that actually react differently when they're hit at different speeds. So I don't know if you've seen the videos of the kind of pliable putty looking material that people run over. And so if you hit it hard and you run fast, it acts firm because you can kind of hit up against it. But you can put your finger in it and mush it down if you do it slow. So that's kind of the reactive additives and the impact modifiers. So on soft speeds that aren't very fast, the ball still acts soft because the impact modifiers don't press up against it at that speed. And then in a driver that's going really fast, the impact modifiers firm up because they feel a hard force and they let the ball be faster. So in the 2022, what we did is we're kind of elevating that contact science, and the cover on the new ball is called the Reactive IQ. It's one of the first times I've said that this week. Been excited to talk about the Reactive IQ, and the IQ came from, obviously the IQ is a very marketing thing to call it, but it actually was derived by, we added more of the impact modifiers even to this material and took it further, And internally, we were saying that it's like they're getting smarter. The cover's getting smarter, the innovation's getting smarter. It's like, how much can you do? And we all understand that we're living in a world of incremental innovation, and that's what we live in. We live to make it just make the ball a little bit better. The going from wound to solid core was a huge jump. 2 years ago, we went from the regular cover to the reactive cover, and then now we're just continuing to kind of move that along and continue to make that ball better. So obviously, this cover was co-designed by Bryson, Tiger, Lexi, and Fred. Had a lot of input into the design of the cover. It's so good to rely on the tour players because they are so consistent with their strikes, so they can provide us with a lot of feedback. Because our R&D team in Japan and here in the U.S., they're writing these formulas and we're using charts and Excel spreadsheets, and something may look really awesome on paper, but then Tiger hits it and he just, oh, I don't know about that, or quite vice versa. So we saw some really cool reactions out of the players. I'll never forget the last version of the X when Bryson hit it in Dallas and late September, I believe. He started hitting some wedge shots, and he did one of these. He tilted his head and said, "Huh, did you guys hear that?" And he kind of did one of those. And the guy's, he hits the golf ball every day. He knows the sound. He knows what it's supposed to make. He knows exactly the way it's supposed to go. And so he hit one, and it was the first one of the final version, and it was because it got it to where it was his ball, the final version. We have all these prototypes, but this was like his old ball, the final one. And he turned to us and said, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "Yeah, I heard it. Let's hit a few more and let's see what we got here." And he kept hitting it, and he just loved the way the sound and the design of the pitch coming off of that club sounded for him. So obviously his wedges are very important to him. He's got the distance, he's hitting the ball very far. So he said one thing he wants to focus on is more consistent wedge shots. So he challenged us, I don't know, 24 months ago when we started down this process. He goes, "I need the standard deviation of spin on my wedge shots tighter because I need to hit the ball the same distance better and better," which is like, okay, of course, let's, rub our hands together, create some magic, and make a better ball. So he really challenged us to, I'd love to see some standard deviation tightened up. And then he's talking about standard deviation of from the fairway to when he hits it in the rough. Like, I'd love for them to be closer because that's what you get, right? You get a fairway shot, you hit a nice little full pitch and wedge, 9,000 RPMs, maybe 10,000 if you're spinning it. When you go to the rough, that may drop to 72 or 75. He was saying, I'd love to hit it from the fairway at 10 and then from the rough at 8. So we're like, yeah, okay. And so what we did with the impact modifiers is how they act on those shots is a little bit tighter. And so we kind of squished that standard deviation down. And we saw that with the prototypes. It was really cool because we tested with him and we're out there on the range, and then we get the computer and we lug it into the shop and into the hitting bay. And then we sit down with him and we literally pull it over into Excel and start looking at charts. And you can see, old ball, this is what happens in the rough. This is what happens when you're fairway. And then the other ones got a little bit tighter. And then we got down to a prototype to where it was, you're never going to get the same. It's just not going to happen. But if you can get it a little bit tighter, he said, this is me not flying the green and rolling off the back. Like if I could hit it here rather than that jumper, and so those were the things he was looking for. And this new cover is amazing in the X and XS, but I gotta tell you, what we did in the RX and RXS is unlike anything we've ever done in a generation, in those golf balls. We really sat down and we worked with the consumer level and Lexi and Fred in that RX and RXS, because you can't build a ball for a consumer that overspins. They're going to start losing distance, and nobody likes to lose 7-8 yards off the tee and sacrifice for a spinny ball. You're not going to find people out there who shoot low 80s and trying to get into the 70s say, yeah, I could lose 7 yards for a lot of spin around the greens. Occasionally, you're gonna have a really good player that is long enough that will, but inside the RX and RXS, we designed that golf ball to maintain that strong distance off the tee, but we wanted to give them a little more control. So the impact modifiers have increased really well in the RX and RXS, and they have been designed amazingly for consumers. We've seen so many good results from those two. I feel like the RX and the RXS have taken a bigger jump than when we went from, I think it was 2010 to the 12 model. Those were some great RX and RXS balls back then. That's, I guess, the nerd in me knowing all that stuff about the history of Bridgestone, but like these are going to be awesome. Fred loves it. Lexi's changing over to the RX, which is just amazingly exciting for us. And I'm excited about the new Reactive IQ cover. We're saying it's the smarter tour ball. You want that tour ball, but then everybody also wants a Serlin distance ball off the tee. So what we're trying to do is the holy grail, right, is low spin off the tee, and then, or I should say, low spin off the tee and high spin off your wedge. So you're really trying to tilt the scales more and more rather than just like, oh, we'll just put a softer cover on it and all the spin goes up. We want to kind of stretch that slope to where you're almost hitting knuckleballs off the tee and then you're spinning it back around the green. So get the close to that as we can is the ultimate goal. But the good thing about the line too is they're all so unique. Obviously the X and XS have that that core material that's made for a little bit firmer, faster speeds. But then the RX and RXS is designed for swing speeds under 105, so they're a little bit softer. But then the urethane formula on all four of these are so different. The RX is less spin. It's for a guy who wants to see the ball kind of one hop and check. The RXS has a little bit of spin, to where you're going to yoke it and really kind of get bite on the ball. The X is that Bryson ball to where he still has to have tour performance and really get a lot of spin on some firmer greens. And then, of course, the XS is just a ton of spin for a guy looking to just hit those low, flighted, spinny shots that really check around the green. So they all kind of have unique properties. And it's like you said, the portfolio is designed to be that way. We don't want... And the worst thing we could do is design two balls that feel like they're the same, right? Like, oh, I don't really feel a lot of difference between the X and the XS. They're kind of the same, and you want to build them to where they fit a different quality of player all through the line and what they need. So,
yeah, I think back when I made the switch to the XS, it was 2018, and I remember I took a couple sleeves out from the guys over here at Bridgestone South Africa, and I think I had like 100 and what was like 200 meters to the pin, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna hit a couple shots here, 5-iron, and I just remember a couple like iffy strikes, and I'm like, ooh, that's not gonna get there, not gonna get there. I hit maybe 2 in a row, and I hit one pure, and I go up to the green, and I'm like, okay, the pure one is about 205. And the ones that I didn't really strike well were like 197, 195. So it was like a little 5-meter drop off, which were bad strikes. And I was like, okay, this is different. Like it feels different. It didn't feel like I got all of it, but yet I'm still almost at my stock yardage on a 5-iron. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. And then it kind of goes back to your whole analogy of low spin off the driver and then like more spin as you kind of lessen the speed on the shorter clubs. And it's always been a interesting thing still now hitting the XS. It's like it just doesn't feel, it feels like I'm cheating in a sense as well. It's like I'm getting so much more distance with the longer clubs and I'm still retaining the spinner on the green. So I think me personally, it is one of the best balls out there. For me at the moment, I gained so much distance with the longer clubs. So it was such a weird kind of obsession over this new ball that I was playing. So it's obviously great to hear that you guys are constantly, looking for more ways to make it more, like you mentioned, that standard deviation that Bryson was talking about. That's going to be interesting. to see in a consumer available product. I think that's what makes it so exciting, that it's not just for Bryson as well. It's also that end of the spoon where you're like, oh, I'm also going to get that off the shelf, which is very interesting because with myself being around so many tour players, you see so many things that just aren't available to us. We can just see it from the sidelines, and we're like, oh, that's great for you, but not great for me
Yeah.
because I'm just looking from the sidelines. So it's I think really exciting from that point of view, that we'll have access to something that game changing.
We internally we say that when Tiger helps us develop XS and Bryson helps us develop X, they're also giving us data to make RX and RX better, because they're kind of built on the opposite spectrum of each other, but they're almost like mimics of each other. And so like we'll look at data for Tiger and Bryson for those two, and then look at a ton of data from consumers and see the likenesses in it. And so like you said, what Tiger gives us feedback wise for XS does help us build our XS for the consumer. And same thing with like Bryson with X and Kuchar and all those other guys. So we want to make that RX and RXS better for the consumer. Of course we want to make a better ball for Bryson and Tiger, but for the consumer, that's important for us too, is not to just sit and be like, yeah, RX and RXS are kind of fine where they are. We're gonna focus on Tiger and Bryson. Like we put just as much stake in the other balls. I mean, we do prototype testing for the lady ball and E6 and E12. We just don't kind of thumb through a catalog of specs from our guys and say, hey, let's make this one. It's fine. Let's make it a little soft. I mean, we do a lot of testing, and if the ball isn't incrementally better, or the innovation doesn't make it better, then we're not going to do it. So we take a lot of pride in that. Our R&D department here and in Japan is very prideful in making a better product and continue to innovate, and kind of move the ball down the line and get better and better to that perfect ball.
Yeah, I think that's something we can look forward to, and I think to this day, I think we still basically out of stock. I know there is kind of the supply chain challenges that the world faces across every spectrum right now, but
Yep.
it's fair to say I've still got stock at home, so I'm still very happy, and and I'm still playing the XS, which is great, and I'm very excited to get my hands on the new one. So it's going to be an interesting. Golf is in the space of. It's kind of like we in the smartphone phase right now, where everything is so good, and
Yeah.
it's kind of everyone has the chance to play better golf. As long as I think it comes back to the being the number one ball foot in golf, and trying to beat that into people's heads that that's the one item that you kind of involved with in every single shot. The golf was the consistent kind of denominator. So if you can get fitted for that, you literally one step ahead of majority of the golfers out there. And you guys are obviously number one for a reason. And I think maybe this is also where we start seeing a lot more tour players start playing these balls. I think it's only a matter of time before more players start. And obviously, that guys come and ask you guys questions about it. So it is quite an exciting time for Bridgestone.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we got a few guys out playing the ball out of contract. We got a couple guys that we're hoping to kind of get something together here and make an announcement. I mean, there is some demand on tour, and I'm not gonna lie, Tiger does drive demand on tour. Like we've got somebody that's really close to us that's playing the ball, and he quite frankly said, I was around Tiger watching him do some stuff with y'all's ball a year or two ago, and it was like pretty amazing to see, because as there's urethane balls that spin, but they launch high off of a wedge shot. They kind of do like this motion. Tiger likes to have that low, spin and low flight. And so, people have told us like, watching him hit a low spinner that doesn't get, above the trees, but then he spins it back 40 feet. I just don't understand how he's doing that. And it's the composition and the specification of the ball. It's how you make it. I mean, if you make a ball that's too firm in the core and then it's got three mantle layers that are super firm, it's gonna launch high and it might spin, sure. Tiger talks about it. I mean, he says, some of these young guys like to play the high game and they put the ball up in the air and it still spins back. But like I don't want it that window. So, we've got guys that have watched him hit wedge shots from 60 yards and say, I can't do that with my ball, even if I wanted to, even if I had the right loft and if I did everything he did, like that ball just doesn't do that. And so we've had a lot of guys reach out to us and say, I want to play that ball because I saw him do that and I can't. Like I want to figure out what it did. So there's interest out there, and we're like I mentioned earlier, we're probably will always be a small staff sort of company unless something dramatic happens. But there's always interest. Every year we've got three or four pretty high level guys that want to play our ball or have, and it's just a thing of logistics and marketing and staff funds available on whether we can actually kind of get the deal done or not. But I mean, there's a lot of guys on tour that want to play our ball, and it's good to see. Bryson and Tiger definitely drive a lot of that interest, and they see what they do with the ball. And I'm excited about some potential people that we could get here soon and have talking to, and kind of moving forward from that.
No, I think that's exciting news. And again, thanks for coming on and giving us the early scoop on the Bridgestone. We'll obviously, be waiting very patiently out here in SA for it to land. We're always looking for ways to improve our game. That 1% makes a huge difference at the end of the day with the
Hmm.
scorecard. So thanks for coming on and giving us all the lowdown on the new Tour B.
No, Shannon, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it. It's an exciting few days, and I enjoy talking to it. And we'll make sure to get you some of the new ones to try out, the new XS for you, and looking forward to it. And talk to you again soon.